Watching the NBA playoffs keep going on without the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm sure it's difficult for a lot of Sixer fans out there, but the basketball has been very interesting. And one of the other pieces is, how much different are those teams to your Philadelphia 76er basketball team? Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast, along with Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna's producing, as always. You guys and gals there in the chat. And this is going to be a fun conversation, breaking down and looking at, as we talk about the wings over the first few days here of the offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers and which one you would prefer on your basketball team. Watching these other squads, you see that there's a little bit different type of team out there on the floor for each and every one of them. And I was very curious with the guys of how much of that has you thinking about this upcoming offseason and how to build around, of course, Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, what you might take from some of the others in terms of what you would like for your Philadelphia 76ers to look like for the 24-25 season. And that is simply, are there any lessons to be learned and had from watching Minnesota, OKC, New York, Indiana, Boston, Cleveland, and even the Dallas Mavericks with those final teams remaining? Kyle, what's up, man?
I mean, the thing we would learn from the Mavericks is that it's good to have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving on your basketball team, obviously. But I'm doing good, man. I've had a lot of angry Knicks fans in my mentions over the last, not even 24 hours, last week or so, as I'm watching these games and just making observations about what's going on with the calls and things, and saying that I had a guy. The funniest part, right, is that I'm just sitting there as
we build a show around what are your observations about teams? And Kyle's like, these fucking fans.
I'm observing the Knicks, right? I'm observing them. I'm observing the Pacers, certainly.
Yep.
I've made comments on the show about how, and Tyrese Halliburton had a good game in last night's game.
He did.
But I thought you've seen in these playoffs the limitations of building around him. I just think it's been funny that people are like, oh, you're still crying about the Sixers. I was like, buddy, the only consequence that has happened for me is that there are no more nights and weekends for me.
We have to get a little more creative on our Monday through Friday, but outside of that,
I'm just enjoying the basketball. So to start, first place my brain goes, I think this is a universal watching all these games, all these teams on some level. The Sixers are just not athletic enough, right? I think that manifests in so many different ways. And some of that, frankly, is just age, right? If you had 29 or 30-year-old Nick Batum instead of 34, 35-year-old Nick Batum, if you had younger Kyle Lowry, if you just had guys in that, prime age range, you have a better chance on the hustle plays, on the boards, to be a better defensive team where you're not so reliant on Joel Embiid to be the lifesaver, the guy at the rim to stop everything. Now, in some ways, their defensive scheme is designed around funneling guys toward Joel, and that's all well and good. And certainly that's how you should play when you have a rim protector of his level. But as we talked about earlier this week with Paul Reed and their insistence on playing drop even with Paul, I think that in a lot of ways shows what the limitations of the roster are overall. Because if you had a younger, more athletic, longer team, and you could put a 2 through 4 on the floor that you're like, okay, yeah, I'm happy with this group and Paul, and then maybe a DeAnthony Melton as not a point guard, but the pseudo ball handler
combo
for that group.
In that sense.
Then you're going out there and you're saying, okay, we're switching 1 to 5. We're playing aggressive full court press defense. And they certainly, it's not that they didn't have anybody, right? We saw Kelly in the Knicks series and throughout the last few months of the season. When they wanted to junk things up, Kelly would play that high full court pressure, force the Knicks into some 8-second violations. And there's some of that, but it still never felt like they had the group that I think Nick Nurse wants. And I do think there's a middle ground, right? Nick Nurse did not want a team with no guards and no shooters in Toronto, right? Like the offensive side of the ball matters. You don't want to go to the other side either, where it's to get the skills that you need on offense, the spacing, the shooting, that you have to sacrifice everything you want on defense. And so I do think they need to try to find more of a middle ground with the role players that they have. I know that that's easier said than done, because you can fall into the trap of this guy's okay at everything, and then you get to the playoffs and a guy who's like a 35, 36% three-point shooter can't hit the broadside of a barn for, 3 weeks to a month or whatever it is. But I do think watching all these games, the athleticism of most of these teams is what really jumps off the screen.
And Derek, real fast to follow that, Lost Speed TV, just to incorporate, of course, the folks, says length and speed. When watching these other teams and looking at your 76ers.
I wouldn't say so much these playoffs have shown me where the Sixers have deficiencies. It's more like the last decade of NBA basketball showed where the Sixers had deficiencies. Like I have wanted we talk about rebounding a lot. Rebounding was a disaster against the Knicks.
Yep.
Part of the way part of the way you fix your rebounding problem is to not always be in rotation. A team in rotation is always going to struggle on the glass, in part because Joel Embiid has to step up and contest, in part because other players are more worried about putting out fires and getting back on the glass. A big way you can fix your rebounding problem is to not get beat off of the dribble. One way you can do that is to get bigger athletes who can switch so you don't have to try to fight through a pick and roll every time. The Sixers, because they had so little ball handling, were running two guard sets that were short. They were too short. They were too small. You couldn't switch anything. You were getting beat off the dribble. You were getting beat off the pick and rolls. And because of that, you were constantly out of position on the glass. So I think a lot of it comes down to not only do they need athleticism, but they need size too. Like we can't be running out 6'2", 6'2" backcourts and expecting them to compete on the glass. It's not going to do it. It's not going to do it in part because those 6'2" guys aren't going to be good rebounders. It's not going to do it in part because you're going to get beat off the dribble and into rotations constantly. To me, it's about size as much as athleticism. I would love some athleticism as well, but I want size. The second thing that I learned from these playoffs, which again, I think it's more of a consistent trend, but it more comes down from the Sixers. You need somebody else to be a playmaker. You desperately need someone else to be a playmaker. Obviously, that very much applies to the minutes without Joel Embiid when Tyrese Maxey is asked to do everything. How comfortable teams were to blitz Tyrese and be like, I'm not scared of a single one of you MFers to beat me off the dribble on a 4-on-3. That can't happen. So I think that's a big thing. And that's a big part of why a lot of people look for a third star. But also it'll just help with Embiid too. Like it is just the more you have players who you are like the NBA has gotten so smart about helping off of non-shooters or reluctant shooters. And that reluctant is as important as a non-shooter, that they will use every one of those players on the floor to take advantage. And in the playoffs, you just can't have it. So it would be, outside of athleticism, it would be one more playmaker and size and shooting. Like there just can't be a non-shooter on the floor. It can't happen.
And one quick thing before, I'm sure Devon has a lot of thoughts of his own here. On the size point, I thought the game and the moment that I've really felt that for the Sixers, and we talked about it after it happened, was in Game 4 in the fourth quarter. Kyle Lowry was getting to the right spots. Kyle Lowry is trying to box guys out. But Kyle Lowry is 6 feet tall competing with OG Anunoby. Mm-hmm. And he just realistically does not have a chance. Like Joel Embiid can do what he needs to do. Tobias Harris can be in the right spot and all these things can happen. If Kyle Lowry is cross-matched on OG Anunoby on an offensive rebounding opportunity, there is no reasonable expectation you can have that he's going to get that rebound. And so like that's part of why when we talked about free agents the other day, that I was lower on Lowry and said, unless he is knowing he's coming back on a 10 to 15 minute a game role, I don't want him back here, is because you're going to end up in situations like that. Like Tyrese Maxey is going to play every single crunch time minute for this team. He's going to start. He's going to play major minutes. There's only so many minutes of a game you can get a guy like that, like Lowry, on the floor for. And so if you try to bring someone like that back and put him on the roster, you're inevitably going to run into these same problems over and over and over again. And look, if it comes down to it, Lowry's back, certainly has value that he brings to the team as a leader, still on the floor, the defensive rotations, the smarts, the transition hit-ahead passes, all that. But I think you can see it glaringly in moments like that.
And guys, again, gals, Sixer fans, everybody in there, make sure you share yours in the chat as well, and we'll throw some of those in there. But it made me think, as Derek said, the last decade of Sixers basketball, and certainly the playoffs with these last 8 appearances that they've had. For even when someone like myself, I can only speak for myself, when Jalen McDaniels is traded to the 76ers last offseason, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. They actually have somebody with some athleticism and some length that can help out, that I've seen do things with the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe a new change of scenery out of a losing situation to a winning situation will help him out, and certainly help out the 76ers for some of those things when you get to Boston in whatever round you find them. It was in the second round last season, didn't help as much. But immediately you saw it there, and then you also saw it disappear for him. So with the lack of those types of players on this basketball team for so long, it just makes you pine for one. However type of guy it is. I saw Daniel House's name mixed in there in the chat. He's not the answer either, but he does have that skill set that Derek and Kyle are talking about.
You're taking a flyer on those types of guys.
And you get a little bit more excited of a player who is not necessarily the one that you want, but it's just because it's highlighting the fact that you don't have them. So when we talk about Paul George and Jimmy Butler and their ages of 34 and 35, then we always go back to, yes, this is the negative here, this is the negative here, but guess what they also don't have? They don't have him at all on the roster, which makes you say, I will pay that because you don't have that, and how else are you going to get it through here? But when I look at Jaden McDaniels for the Minnesota Timberwolves and how good he is with his length and his athleticism, watching him fight over screens the way that he does to get to stick with his man and cut off that pathway that you're not getting to the spot that you want because he is taking that away. He is all and crowding in your space. And even if he picks up a foul, you're still thinking about it the next time. Or even when, as we were having the discussion about Nickeil Alexander-Walker the other day, yes, he has found his role with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but buying into what they do because they have an identity of how they do it, where he fits into that. And even in the rebounding that you're talking about with Indiana, watching Isaiah Jackson come off the bench and snatch rebounds, or watching some of the other guys, not even Miles Turner, just some of the other players that come in to snatch rebounds. Aaron Nemhard finding that not 6'2", maybe 6'3", listed as 6'4", with Tyrese Halliburton, but plays bigger. Where
well, it helps
you
when
see
Halliburton is
yes, but you see the type of player again that you look at and say, where's that guy on this roster? So when we get excited about Ricky Council Jr., I mean the fourth, there's things there, but we also get excited about Ricky Council the fourth because again, they don't have that.
Yeah,
they haven't had that. So it takes us to a point where we have to get overly excited about a player like that and see if he can contribute, see if Jaden Springer can contribute in this uniform. And that's what some of this playoffs here is showing me, that they are far behind. They can win the way that they win if Melton is out there and healthy and able to go. If Embiid, of course, is 85, 90% of himself, still dealing with a playoff injury like he typically does. But they're glaringly missing that type of stuff on this roster. Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the reason, outside of, just his overall aura, why so many people gravitated towards Oubre. Like, he is a flawed example of an archetype they just desperately need. And you look at him on the court and you're like, oh, he has the actual size and athleticism and speed to be an NBA player. Like that clicks in my brain as somebody who, yes, that's an NBA athlete. The Sixers don't really have NBA athletes. And like I said, just his ability to switch if they need to. Not that they did a whole lot because they played a lot of short guards, but or fight through screens. It would be a big help. It would be a big help if they could find that for somebody who would shoot like 35 to 38% from three rather than 32 to 33%. But that is absolutely, they need a couple of them for sure.
And frankly, that's why we banged the drum for Ricky as hard as we did this year, is because, like, the important thing with Ricky, the defense is messy as it is for rookie, but you can see the flashes there. But on the other end of the floor, as much as the shooting was a question mark, and I think we all agreed that he clearly looked like he had improved the mechanics and was coming along toward the end of the season, even without that, Ricky had the ability to put the ball on the floor and get himself to the basket. And that,
as unorthodox as it may look, It was effective.
That bit of self-creation ability, that is the difference between someone who can and cannot play in the playoffs. Because actually, on the other end of the spectrum, a great example in 2018 was Robert Covington, right? His complete inability to put the ball on the floor made it so easy to defend him and by extension the Sixers, because what Boston ended up doing is just crowding him. They said, okay, we know that you're a high volume, and he didn't shoot well on top of this, but we know that you are a high volume 3-point shooter. We know that that's all you can do. So we're going to play up on you as much as we humanly can. And if you try to go by, we know that your handle is not good enough, not functional enough, not trustworthy enough, that if you put it on the floor more than once, maybe twice, we think we can poke it away from you. And they had a lot of success doing that. The rare time he was able to get to the rim, they're able to force him into crazy shots. And so you have to have...
And by crazy shot, you mean like a standard layup that he would throw off the backboard.
Right. And I do think over his career, by the time he came back here, I think Cove had put a lot of work in, and still, obviously, he's not crossing guys over.
Sure, no,
crazy. But as a straight line driver, improved. And so that's why with Ricky, I already see the handle is there to the extent it's a functional. I can get to the basket and I can leverage my strength, like the physical tools he already has. That has a skill component that he can build off of. So if he can shoot, that kid has all the makings of the sort of player we're talking about here. He's the sort of guy that we see on every team in the playoffs. Like if you just go through Oklahoma City's rotation, everybody outside, even Jalen Williams, I think fits the profile just about perfectly, right? Like prototype size, two-way guy, can beat you off the bounce, is a good catch and shoot guy, can play on or off the ball. But then you go past him, Shai, and Chet, and it's like, okay, they just drafted Case and Wallace. They have Isaiah Joe, who even though he's skinny, is at least like decent size and certainly has the offensive skills. You got Wiggins coming off the bench that he's offering this up. If Giddey could shoot even a little bit, he would have the multi-dimensional skills we're talking about. But you just go on and on and on down the line. They just have so many guys that can step in between the three pillars and the combinations that they put on the floor, and it's all just interchangeable. I'm so envious of what Oklahoma City has put together. And with all those draft picks, all the flexibility they have into the future, they can turn this into just like an assembly line. Like, okay, we're just drafting the next 3-and-D type guy with a little bit of creation ability.
Put that jersey on him.
And it's just,
next thing.
Hey, you're the next guy wearing number 11.
Right,
come on down.
Right.
Like that's where you want to be as an organization. And that's beyond just, obviously Sam Presti has done an incredible job scouting and identifying the talent, but you also need the coach and the developmental program and the supporting pieces to make that happen. So they to me are the blueprint for most of the league, and I'm just super envious of what they have going on.
You got me on that one because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. But we can add on to that and get Derek's thoughts on his and how he would like. How far are the Sixers from even accomplishing something like that? Because look, Daryl Morley mentioned four names coming back.
And one of them, Kyle and I didn't even really believe in.
Exactly. So they might not, there's a lot of room to improve this roster and have those types of talented players on this roster. Sixer fans, if your eyes are watering and you got to wipe your nose or let me blame it on my allergies. I don't know. You're mad at all these players that you're seeing. It's not on my roster. Blame it on your allergies. I got a place for you to go. Well, Derek does.
Well, as we tell you about how the Sixers can protect themselves from yet another early playoff exit next summer or next season, we want to tell you how you can protect yourself. Protect yourself and your family by staying up to date on your immunizations. Rite Aid pharmacists are specially trained, certified immunizers. And did you know that most vaccines are no cost with insurances or through government plans like Medicare Part D? Are you unsure what vaccines you need? Get a personalized recommendation from a Rite Aid pharmacist. And if you have questions about vaccines, stop in and ask a Rite Aid pharmacist as well. Rite Aid pharmacists can vaccinate you for COVID-19, shingles, pneumonia, tetanus, whooping cough, and chickenpox, and more. Select Rite Aid stores have a dedicated pharmacist ready to administer vaccines and answer all of your questions. If If you have any questions on what immunizations you need, if you're not sure, if you're up to date, or if you're feeling nervous to ask questions, a Rite Aid pharmacist will take the time to make personalized recommendations based on your health history and discuss any concerns. No questions are too small. Just walk in or schedule an appointment Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. State, age, and health restrictions may apply. Ask a Rite Aid pharmacist for details.
All right, and as you get ready for the playoffs that we're talking about, basketball still going on without your Philadelphia squad. Still games to be played. And right now, this show here with us is brought to you by the BetParx app. Get in the zone with the BetParx Sportsbook app, and money is in the moments. And in the moment, baseball team, they snapped their 7-game winning streak yesterday by falling to their getaway game. They get back on the field on Friday. So we'll have some stuff for you maybe there for tomorrow. But if you're looking at the professional basketball schedule for tonight, 2 games, one in the East, one in the West. Boston looking to take a 2-game lead over Cleveland and Boston. And also, as Kyle mentioned, OKC, they host the Dallas squad. So both teams right now, the home favorites for them. And I'm not fighting against it. Right now, Boston is a minus 13.5 point favorite at home, defending their floor to take a 2-game lead over the Cleveland squad. I agree with it. So I'm not even going to fight you on there. But did they figure something out against that OKC team? Very deep team. But Dallas has some things too there with some players with some athleticism, some length as well, that maybe they can match up with some things, some really good coaches there to figure it out. 5-point home favorite for OKC right now. Any of those jump out to you? Well, I'm going with the home teams. Maybe you feel a little bit better about the underdog. If you do want to get involved with that, you have to go again to our great folks at BetParx Sportsbook app. Win big with all-day action. When your first $10 bet and earn $125 in sports bet bonuses. You play for fun. You love to win. You bet. Download the app. Play along with us. Must be 21 or older. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You guys feel any bright light coming in here?
I do. I do.
Do you have any bright light coming in?
Not just the lights here in the studio. It's
As we watch Kyle undress.
Oh my God. It's sunny out. It's sunny again in Philadelphia.
It's feeling real sunny in here.
Look at this. What do we have? Oh. Look at that, folks.
The Shady Rays, everybody.
It's time for the shades, folks.
The future is bright with Shady Rays, everyone. Let's put on our rose-colored glasses and explain to the people why the future is bright for the Philadelphia 76ers and Tyrese Maxey. This segment brought to you by Shady Rays. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY at checkout for 35% off polarized sunglasses.
Love it. Look at that. Look at this. As much as we're talking about the future of this roster.
In your shirt pocket, not anywhere else. We didn't need any other clothing coming off.
I came prepared, man. Come on.
It's always sunny there, no matter what. And make sure you get your Shady Rays. The future is bright for Tyrese Maxey. But Derek, as Kyle talked about that OKC Thunder roster, keeping the shades on perfectly for the rest of the show. Kyle is doing
just the segment.
Just the segment.
The one segment.
All right. How do they get there, man? I mean, with the space that they do have.
I mean, get to like OKC levels of bright future.
Or do you see one of the other teams that you can mirror maybe a little bit more? You already have your foundation of the 2 players in Embiid and Maxey. Is there a team that you look at outside of OKC where you say, all right, I think they can build, but they have to do this, even with those 2 players already on the roster?
I mean, the only way to get to OKC levels is to go back to 2016 and not cave to silver. That's your only chance of doing that. Like, they have so many. It's just wild how many draft picks they have in the future, how much cap flexibility they have in the future. It's just wild. I'm so jealous. I will be envious of that my whole life. No, I don't think this is one thing where I sort of agree with Daryl. Like, a lot of people want to talk about a blueprint to success, and he pushed back on that in his press conference. I do think we can be a little prisoner of the moment. Like, this team is winning, so this is how you 100%. Have to build a team. No, I think you try to find the best fit around Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid and go from there. You have one, if you are convinced they're going to use one significant salary slot, whether that's a trade acquisition or a signing, then you have probably about $9 to $15 million left to spend. Spend that. Use your room mid-level. So there you have your 3 guys that we're all confident will be back in Embiid, Maxey, and Ricky. You have those 3 additions right there that I just talked about, the 1 salary slot, or 1 big slot, 1 small slot, 1 room level. So you've got your 6-man rotation built out there. And then you've just got to try to find a couple diamonds in the rough. I don't necessarily think that you go out and try to mimic a team. Like maybe of the teams that are playing, like Denver is what you aim for just because you have that 2-man game with the big, but I don't know how they're going to get there. Like, let's say even at the detractors of Paul George would say, like, he could at least play a similar role to Michael Porter Jr. All right, well, where are you getting the Gordon piece from? You just don't really have that kind of flexibility to build that kind of depth. But you get the best piece to fit around Embiid and Maxey and go from there.
Actually, I want to build off that because one, I want to say I wholeheartedly agree with the point of one of the biggest mistakes in team building in general, but I think has certainly afflicted this franchise.
It's a little tough to take you seriously with those glasses.
That's on the future is just so bright over here, man.
Keep your glasses on.
You can't chase trends. Like if you want to talk about, you want to buy into the macro trends, right? Like the 3-point shot is important and floor spacing matters. But when, for example, Minnesota this year, a lot of people, and Boston in previous years had certainly played a lot of 2 bigs, but there are going to be people who are like, we got to have more bigs. We got to load up on the front court and do all that. And like, to me, that's not the lesson. The lesson there is that Minnesota committed to a specific identity and said, we are going to go all in on this. Now, you can be wrong. You can commit to the wrong identity. You could say, like the Phoenix Suns, for example, we're going to invest way too heavily in guys who are mid-range pull-up shooters, and then you end up in NBA no man's land. So that is problematic. But one of the reasons that I keep stumping for Paul George, even though I'm not thrilled with the idea of paying him over the next 4 years, is that if you sign him, the door remains open to say, okay, now we can trade 2 first-round picks for Alex Caruso. Sure. Now we can trade 2 or 3 first-round picks for, name another high-end role player that maybe that's not Aaron Gordon. Like Alex Caruso is limited because he's not going to scale up to like the big 3s and 4s, but in terms of point of attack, like what you're talking about,
he's an all
not
NBA
allowing
defensive
dribble
guard.
penetration and not being in rotation constantly. He helps that because there are far fewer guards who are just going to blow by your point of attack defense and then force Joel Embiid to step up, force Joel Embiid to chase a block shot attempt, and then you get put into tough rebounding positions. That's why Paul George would be a big get for them. One, because Paul George is still good, even if, and we'll get to, what his former teammate Evan Turner has to say about him in a little bit. And we've discussed already quite a bit what his drawbacks are, I think. But you still have the flexibility and the extra options to team build after you get him that you really don't have if you have to trade, 2 and 3 first-round picks for the Jimmy Butlers of the world.
The only reason I would push back on that is because the Sixers, if they, let's say they trade for Jimmy Butler and it costs 2 first-round picks to do that, which I think is sort of like the market that I've set. I don't know if that's realistic, but that's sort of like where I feel. You still have 3 picks left to trade and you have no matching salary. So the limiting factor there doesn't even really become the picks you have. It's the fact that you have no matching salary. So there is, you do get to a point. I agree with you though, with like Paul George and Caruso specifically next to Paul George, I think is an almost perfect fit. Yeah. Because you've got the elite, and say what you want about Paul George. He is a high volume, accurate 3-point shooter. That one of the, Caruso is not necessarily a high volume shooters, but you have so much size and defensive versatility and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. I think that would be a really good fit. But like I said, the limiting factor eventually becomes, I have all these draft picks, but now I have nothing to match salary with. Now, you keep those draft picks, you get maybe a year out, you have a little flexibility. You don't have to do everything in this summer, but you do get to a point where because you had to renounce so many people to be able to sign Paul George, that you now have no ability to match any salary.
And with that zigging and zagging and building, because others are doing it, I saw Elton Brand's name in the chat, and when he signed Al Horford a couple of seasons ago, the idea, as we talk about not doing what other people are doing, he decided that he wanted to go in a different direction. He said, we saw this play out one way. I want to now see it this way with the bigs and the rebounding and the defense and even helping out when B goes to the bench where he can be that backup 5 that you can trust and not lose much there. The idea was right. It didn't work. But so as we talk about that.
I also wonder, that's one, and this is like way down the line, the Horford thing. I always wonder, it was a bad fit and it was right to move on at the time because and I think people forget this now, Joel was absolutely fucking miserable playing next to Al Horford, among other things. But I do wonder if they had just like a standard point guard on that team and not Ben Simmons, how that would have worked. I'm not saying it would have worked. I'm just curious how that might have played out if, like, let's just say it was with Maxey instead of Ben Simmons. How much different does that look?
Yeah, the idea I liked. I got it.
But Al Horford stole money that year.
He did steal the money, yes. Yeah, a lot of factors that go into it. But again, the idea for me at least, it was right. It did not work. So as you look at things now and try to figure out where they're going to go, where does Kelly Oubre maybe fit in this if they can afford him and coming back? Because as you talked about, what he bought into, showing us some of those defensive chops that, quite frankly, you weren't even sure that he had. And you can throw him on Jalen Brunson 75 feet away from the basket and try to hound him all the way up the floor. It was effective. And if you can do that or get Caruso or the Paul George thing that people in the chat are just shooting down left and right. No, Paul George too old. He hasn't been healthy in 4 or 5 years. But again, you also have to look at what might be available to them and what's the best fit, what's around them too. It's not just that player. It's also what's around it. And that's why we're talking about the team building. Because when I look at as much fun as you want to make about, some people might want to make about Dallas, and we talk about Kyrie and Luka, there's no question. Those are the two. But then you add Derek Lively as a young player, very active and buys into his role. PJ Washington, desperately wanting to get out of Charlotte, and he comes in and he plays well in that role as a big body 4/3, just or wing, however you want to call him, that can do multiple things, hit shots, put the ball on the floor, play with his back to the basket, and be active on the defensive end. That's a valuable piece to have on the team. And then you find a diamond in the rough like Derrick Jones Jr., who is going from team to team to team, works out for him in Miami. Then it doesn't work out for him in another location. Chicago, it doesn't work out. He might have found a home in Dallas, or even if he hasn't, he might have gotten himself paid because of you found somebody that fit, maybe along the lines of the Kelly Oubre piece. But that's where you got to strike. And you have to find those little pieces after you make those big splashes that it makes sense for the roster. A point guard to have there is nice to set a lot of things up. And a good coach. I think we're at least the majority of the people, Derek, believe in Nick Nurse, that whatever piece Daryl Morey puts on here, that he can figure it out and get it done because of all the creativity and mad science type of things that we did see when they won in Toronto.
Yeah. That being said, like, it's tough because his last couple of years in Toronto, he had poor creators.
That's why I say when he won.
Yeah. The last couple of years do leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. But I do think, like, you can be out as creative as you want. Like, you need good players, and you need players who can make good decisions on the floor. They just need more of them. Like, you can take, you might have gotten Kelly Oubre as far as any coach was going to get Kelly Oubre, but you still need an upgrade on that spot.
Right. And I know we talked about real fast the Kelly Oubre part and him potentially coming back. We don't know what the money looked like. Just hypothetically, though, the player that we saw, and we all said yes on our stay go, but you could see a role where he could fit into something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As like a sixth
As
or
a
seventh.
sixth,
You need him to
coming
be
off the bench.
a slightly less important player, ideally. He was, to Derek's point, he was too far up the pecking order compared to where he probably needs to be on a good team.
And again, we saw the Miles Bridges thing come up again. It's like we have to do it every show.
I mean, we do. I try to keep it refined to the chat because that's the only place it should be brought up.
No.
Just
fuck no.
It's not happening,
Fuck
man.
that guy.
He can do whatever he needs to do in another city. Pay his dues elsewhere.
Well, we say F no to that guy.
That's
but
right.
F yes to our friends at Coors Light, because guys, from day-to-day annoyances to the big stuff, like your favorite team losing in the first round and having to take grief from Knicks fans for the rest of the playoffs, it's easy to get worked up. But there is a better way. There's a chiller way. When you log off Twitter for the night, when you leave or enter this chat for that matter, when you're watching how the officials are gifting the New York Knicks a bunch of calls, you can choose chill, reaching for an ice cold Coors Light. And with Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice cold beer because the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans when they hit that perfect temperature. As you can tell, I mean, the lights are a little bright on the shirt right now, but I got the island theme going here. Got my Shady Rays sunglasses going on because it's It's a bright summer, bright outlook we have looking ahead. There are still some dark days, some down times during the summer months when you get frustrated, especially we have lots of off time. I'll be working on my house. I'll be doing all the fun, not so fun stuff that I put off for the 6, 7, 8 months of NBA coverage that we just went through. But when I need to choose chill and relax, I know that once I do so, right afterward, I can reach for an ice cold, cold layered, cold filtered, cold packaged with a smooth finish Coors Light and get that mountain cold refreshment. When you choose to rise above it all, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
And if you do, as Kyle sits there with his shades on and you go outside, it's sunny, you go to a baseball game, wide open, the environment is fantastic, you need to get the shades out of your face. Well, you're like, first of all, you got to get
just
the
like
ticket.
I just did.
There you go. You have to get the ticket first, though, to be in the stadium to watch that baseball game. And while Philadelphia may not be here right now after their homestand,
my brother went to his first game all year, and it was yesterday afternoon.
And they lost.
Ended what, a 7-game winning streak? Something like that?
Snapped 7-game winning streak. And they did so. Now they're on the road in Miami. And we know that there are a lot of transplants, a lot of fans in Miami. And if you are saying, you know what, it's the weekend, the hottest team in baseball, despite that loss, the best team in baseball record-wise is in town, and you want to go see your squad, you got to go to Game Time. Get your tickets for Philadelphia and Miami down south there, wearing your shades, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices from your seat and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. And as we mentioned that, they got it set there in Miami. They'll be back in town here soon. So when they do get back up here, they'll come back up east and get their work done as they keep winning and keep things going. You just go right down to the ballpark in South Philly and enjoy yourself and have a great time. And with that, you can also look at, as we mentioned, the last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection as well. Easy to find and buy Major League tickets for every kind of event in your area. Not just sports, though. We keep talking about it. We're going to go to a theater show at some point. Maybe when we're in Vegas, we go out there, save up to 60% off
that
buying
Vegas residency.
last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater, etc. Save even more when you choose a section and Game Time chooses the seats for you. Those are the zone deals. All-in pricing, toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. The Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So, folks, Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app like I have on my phone, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. You'll know you'll have it when you see the G on the app on your phone. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Speaking of New York, when Kyle mentioned that on the basketball side, the other day we were talking about the missed calls. And I was like, hold on. The one that got me was the kickball that they called was clearly Aaron Nesmith knocked it away. And then it was like, wait a minute. Last night, it was a play call. And they gathered around the officials, even though they couldn't review it. And they overturned the call. Kyle, I was sitting here yelling when we were discussing it. You may not be able to review it, but if there's a question in under a minute that you can get together as the officials, gather, and figure out if that was the right call. Kyle, if they didn't do that last night and overturn the call.
Look.
Come on.
I already got yelled at by Knicks fans for pointing this out. I'm going to go through this really quickly.
Oh, man.
The officials ended up getting the call correct. There's no reason they should not have been able to get the call correct in the previous game in a very similar spot. I thought the most absurd part of that sequence last night.
This is the double dribble on Isaiah Hartenstein.
Was that they tried to say it was an inadvertent whistle.
Yeah,
it's like, no, bro, you signaled
you
double
went that
dribble.
way.
What are you talking about? You got caught in 4K.
Oh, man.
It's like, that's what was so tough for me. It's like, it's one thing to say, hey, we got it wrong. That's not what happened. Okay, great. But then do that for the other stuff where you clearly got it wrong. And you were like, oh, no, can't be reviewed, can't be looked at, whatever. We're just moving on. Like, all right, man. Well, why isn't the same energy being applied? I don't know. That was ridiculous. And it's feeding into, look, I'll say this. The Knicks have earned their right to be winning these games and, being within 2 games of a conference finals appearance.
They don't need that kind of help.
They don't need assistance. They don't need the benefit of the doubt on calls. It's why it's been so frustrating, because I think there's this proxy war that's happening now on the basketball internet, we'll say, where a lot of national people are like, how can you not love this Knicks team? And I do get where that sentiment is coming from. They play hard. Guys are getting injured. Guys are coming back from injuries, battling through it. Even Mitchell Robinson, who's now out for an extended period of time. I said it during the first round. It was super admirable, and I gained a lot of respect for him, that even though he was clearly hurt, he was trying to get up and down the floor for his team. Like, that stuff makes them easy to root for. But when you combine the benefit of the doubt they're getting from the whistle, and frankly, how Brunson plays, like, they're trying to act like they're on this higher pedestal. It's like, come on, bro. He's doing all the stuff that Joel does, all the stuff that Trae Young does, all the stuff that all the Jimmy Butler and all the other big foul baiters in the league do. But it's like, it's because he plays for the Knicks. People are pretending that's not the case. It's goofy. So I think those guys should be proud of themselves for the way they played, and we'll see what happens now that they're going to be down to like 6 playable guys. And I still think they'll probably win. Like, that's how much respect I have for the way they play and the remaining guys who are there. But man, don't come to me. Don't come to other people acting like I should be like kissing your fucking feet for the fact that you're winning. Like, relax, man.
Kyle, do you know how you can get Knicks fans out of your mentions? You can learn to sit back and observe, because not everything needs a reaction.
There you go. By the way,
that was bad though, man.
It was bad.
They gathered. They missed the call on Josh Hart. He flat out shoved. Yams brought this one. He shoved Tyrese Halliburton, stumbling and all, and didn't even call that.
There's a play where Isaiah Jackson's going for a defensive rebound, and Josh Hart just spears him. It's like, what are we watching? If you allow one team to play a different sport, it's not that team's fault that they're getting away with those calls, but like, it's a lot of the same energy that I felt watching the Legion of Boom Seahawks, where they committed pass interference on every other play and basically said, we dare you to call it. That's how the Knicks are playing. And credit to them for figuring out, like, if we just play this way for most of 48 minutes, the whistle will benefit us when it comes down to it. It's just aggravating to watch in several ways. And I hate that, because, again, I like the Nova guys. I like the way they play. I like the people individually on that team. It's just a little bit of consistency would be nice. We can find a middle ground between prison rules and the shit that was going on at the beginning of the season where nobody could defend or rebound, right? Like, there is somewhere in the middle.
Elaine Bruno said I can finally root for Josh Hart in peace now, since he's not playing against the Sixers. No, like Kyle said, I root for those guys in general. When they're playing against the Sixers, I want to see the Sixers advance for our selfish purposes of continuing to cover them as they advance in the playoffs, maybe get to the Eastern Conference Finals, hopefully the NBA Finals, so I can experience that, and that will be fun. But I've always rooted for those guys. I've never hid that. I root for any Philadelphia kid that comes out of this area, whether it's football, baseball, basketball. Derrick Jones Jr., Chester Nick, I root for him. Cam Reddish, I try to defend him as long as I can. Until I can't anymore, because he's a local guy. I will not
say the media member who made up this nickname, but he goes by in some circles the great Cambino.
See, I root for all of them. Yes, it is frustrating. As much as I enjoy watching those guys play, they're getting away with a lot of stuff with those calls. A lot of stuff.
But to Kyle's point, I blame the refs far more than I do the players.
What are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
What's that commercial where the kid tipped the ball out of bounds and then he goes to the coach in the huddle and he's like, Coach, I hit it.
Right.
No. You're not doing that.
That's all I'm saying.
You're not doing that.
You don't. I'm not criticizing Josh Hart for playing like a linebacker when they're not going to punish him for playing like a linebacker. Like, continue doing that. You're helping your team win games.
And by the way, as we talk about team building, you want Josh Hart on your team.
Of course.
You want him on your team.
Anybody would want, like, the way he's playing right now. Number one, he'd be on the best value contract in the league if he was going to shoot 44% from three on top of doing all this stuff. But that's the type of guy any team wants on their team.
Yes, absolutely.
And by the way, one more thing. I think we were moving past the first topic on this show.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to say one of the other things, because we haven't really talked about specific teams or players that much. One of the things, and I did stress this during the season, but one of the things that I think they need to keep in mind as like a long-term thing, sometimes you have to go for an upgrade in the short term while still prioritizing the long term. And the best example of that was the Celtics going out and getting Derek White. Like, Derek White has been one of the most important players. We actually had a discussion with Vince the other day in the office about who are the top three guys on every team. And Derek White there were people making a case for him as an all-star this year.
Yeah.
He has been one of their best players in the playoffs, as Jason Tatum is playing like fairly mediocre basketball right now. And that's a guy
Must be great for your star to be playing fairly mediocre basketball and you have like a plus 18 net rating.
Yeah, like, it's ridiculous. But it shows the value of, okay, we have identified this guy fits our system, fits our identity of what we want in the players around Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, etc. We're going to go get him right now. We're going to pay what they paid. It was like a first and I want to say a second and Romeo Langford at the time, if I'm remembering correctly, which, he's out of here. But
G League.
It's the sort of opportunity that no way to do this now, but as they move forward, once they make their star acquisition, whoever that is, their big name acquisition, they cannot go into future deadlines with the we're just going to we'll give up some seconds, but we're prioritizing flexibility. If you want to contend, I don't think you have the luxury to just sit around and wait and let those opportunities continually pass you by, because that's how you end up with the George Hills, the Buddy Hields, guys who are good fits on paper, but are, you're getting 3 months out of them and then saying arrivederci. That's not really going to get it done if you want to really climb that ladder to contention.
Ash Monroe said if Josh Hart was a Sixer, he'd be shooting 15% from
that
three.
That is so true.
That's
he'd be
100% correct.
Yes, I don't know how, I don't know why, but you're right.
All right, let's move on to a few other things. Great stuff in the chat, everybody. We see it. We always appreciate it. By the way, real time with Prince Blue says the New York flipper floppers is what they are called.
I think there's only one of them that applies to, and it unfortunately is the head of the snake.
JB.
Well,
he's a great player without all that. That's the thing.
He made so many tough shots last night.
Yeah,
so many tough shots.
Incredible performance in game 2. So I don't want this to be like, the sour grapes show. Like, the Knicks deserve to be up 2-0. They deserve to win the series against the Sixers. My beef is with the officials and the fact that if you bring up how ridiculous the officiating has been, turns into, oh my God, you hate the Knicks. And it's like, no, I hate how the game's being officiated. That's all.
That's all it is. That's all it is. As we stay on the conversation of the Sixers, but we push it a little further here, our former Sixer and former teammate of Paul George, not with the Los Angeles Clippers, but with the Indiana Pacers when he left Philadelphia, traded to Indiana. Evan Turner also has a podcast out there with Andre Iguodala, and they were talking about Paul George in the playoffs And if he signed to Philadelphia, how this team would then be soft because Paul George comes up small in the postseason.
I have the direct quotes if you'd like me
Please. Yes.
Quote, PG has a history of not showing up. I never met a human that would let a media rumor drive his energy or personality. You know how soft that team going to be if him and Embiid go together. End quote. That's a real big claim from Meat Wad from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, but you know.
Like I said, hasn't Evan Turner talked about how trade rumors impacted him? Isn't that letting a media rumor? I don't know.
He did. Yeah. So again, played with him that year in Indiana, or was it the half a year when he was traded and he was back the next season? He finished out his time there. But I mean, it was like a whatever kind of thing. But as Derek said, he said it himself. He was in the locker room with him. So,
and it ties into PG's perception.
Yes.
Right? Like
Playoff P, by the way.
It's certainly, and I've said, I think that's an unfair. I think he's had some awful moments in the playoffs.
Man.
But I think it's been
Indiana Paul George against LeBron in Miami was
he was
that's what I mean. He had some huge moments in Indiana. He had the conference finals run without Kawhi in LA. Like, it's a guy, it's not like he is just every year they get to the playoffs and he turns into a pumpkin.
And again, I told you guys, I saw that one firsthand because they were playing Phoenix in the Western Conference Finals, and I was out there, and we were biting our fingernails, sitting on the edge of the seat. That building was tense for a while because, like, oh, okay, we're about to push away from these guys. No, Paul George and Reggie Jackson can't miss. So he has had some really good playoff moments.
Yes. When you play, he's played 114 playoff games. When you play that many playoff games, you're going to have some great moments. You're going to have some moments where you go, my gosh, fucking do something. Like, you're going to have highs and lows. That's how this sport works. Look, I'm not going to say, I'm still trying to figure out how I rank like the top priorities. I'm not 100% sure where I'm at. Do I think that Jimmy Butler might be more bankable in the playoffs than Paul George? Yeah, I could see that. But there's fit concerns. There's all kinds. There's age concerns. Both of them have various injury concerns. He did just get off of a season where, like, by most advanced metrics, he was a top 25 player. Mm-hmm. I think it was the most efficient in terms of true shooting percentage of his career. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of, there's a podcast episode of Clippers. I don't know if they're fans or if they're like a credential. I think it's more of a fan podcast. But look, when you sit here and watch a player every day for years and there's unmet expectations, you A, know their game better than anyone else, but B, there's frustration that clouds your judgment a little bit. We can go back to almost everyone that has been here with the Sixers, specifically, James Harden last year, where everyone was dunking on him. Everyone was saying he was done, everything, blah, blah, blah. He comes out, he has a good season for the Clippers. A lot of times your own fans are not necessarily the best evaluators because you have that unmet expectations, because you are so frustrated at what hasn't happened that you can be harder on your own people than others. So that's the only thing I would say about Paul George and like maybe sort of like that reputation. I certainly don't think it's completely without merit. Like, he has come up small at various moments throughout his career. He has also come out and really showed out in the playoffs at various points too. But I think the key for me is you're not bringing him in here to lead the offense. You're not bringing him in here to average 25 per game on good efficiency in the playoffs. You're bringing him in here to be a high volume, 3-point shooting third option who can make a play when there's a 4-on-3 or when there's a closeout to attack or something like that. And how much do you trust him to do that? How well do you think his game ages? Those to me are the big concerns. But like I said, I think there's a little bit of, there's just been so many expectations that haven't been met. I think a good portion of that comes down to injury luck. Like, Kawhi was barely available in this first round series, and that drives a lot of their team. But I understand it too.
And I want to build off of what you're saying there because I think it's important. One, I reject the premise that the guy who just played on a bum knee and with a paralyzed face is soft. And I don't like calling players soft in general, but I especially think it doesn't fit here. But here's the key for me. Even if I were to concede to you, the royal you, that Paul George is soft and playoff P and all this other stuff, if your concern about who they're bringing in is that they fit that in that personality box and Joel needs this or that's not what they need from their third guy, what you are actually saying is that your confidence in the number one guy is not where it should be. What you're actually saying is that you don't believe in Joel Embiid as the number one alpha dog type guy. And there are plenty of people in Philadelphia, whether it's fans, media, what have you, and nationally, who believe that at this point, like based on Joel's track record. But Paul George is not coming here as like the Moses Malone, right? He's not the MVP who's coming here to then become the guy, the leader, the person on the team. Whoever is coming here, whoever they get, whether it's Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Brandon Ingram, Mikal Bridges, whoever that is, they are sliding into the third spot between Joel and Maxey, and they need to be the best possible number 3 for the team. Do I believe Paul George at this stage of his career can be a number 1 or number 2 guy on any sort of consistent basis? No, not on a contending type team. Do I believe Paul George or the rest of these guys for that matter could potentially be the third best player on a title team? 100%. And that is what this ultimately comes down to. You either have to believe in Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey as the 1 and 2, or you need to start having very serious conversations about how you're going to rebuild and restructure the team to get there, because everything else is just window dressing. I know it seems good. Like in an ideal world, what I love for the third player to be a guy with like Jimmy Butler's personality and Paul George's skill set.
And also 26.
And also, 28 years old. Probably, but you don't get to make that choice. You have to pick from the imperfect options that are in front of them. I still believe in Joel and Tyrese as the franchise pillars that can potentially win a title together. And that's why, as people, I know Elaine Bruno, among other people, he's been the most vocal in the chat today. I'm not calling you out for... And I know you're anti-PG. I know there are a lot of
other. I'm just mentioning you by name on the stream.
There are a lot of other chat. It's all good.
A lot of other anti-PG people in the chat, and I get it. He is not perfect by any means. The real concerns are age, health, and all of that as you are preparing to give him a max contract in his mid to late 30s. I get all that. It really just comes down to where are you at with Joel.
No, and I've said this before, but like every time I watch them, I went, yeah, but the impact doesn't seem as good as the stats suggest. And like I said, you look at Paul, and pretty much every advanced metric had him top 25. He most efficient season of his career, but you watch it, it just didn't seem like that was that reliable, that was that impactful. But to Kyle's point, you're not bringing him in to be a top 25 player. You're bringing him in to be a top 40, top 50 player.
I was going to say top 50 is probably where I'd set that.
And to give you something that you haven't had. And like if you just replace Tobias Harris on that squad this year with a 40% high volume 3-point shooter who can also make decisions and attack a closeout, like holy shit, that changes their world completely. Now it gets real easy to find role players to slot in there. Like I said, Paul George, I'm pretty confident in the fit. The age, the aging, the injuries, the contract, that's where some hesitation comes in. But I do think a lot of people picking him apart are because he went to LA as a top, a 1A option, and they didn't get it done. And they didn't get it done in part because of injuries. They didn't get it done just because it's real tough to win in the NBA and because they never really had the great depth around them. But that doesn't mean he can't be a number 3 alongside Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. And I agree. And it's something Daryl said, where, you're not building a team to win when Joel's not there because that team's not winning a finals anyway. That's part of this discussion. Like, you need somebody whose skill set fits and you can project going forward. I do think Paul George is a little easier to project into his late 30s because he does have a reliable shot. He does have a high release point. I think that is going to translate and stick. The question is, how long will he be a plus defender for? How long will he have any kind of juice off the bounce? That's where the conversation comes in. But I think he'll at least be a capable role player for a couple more years here. The question is he the best option? And we will have a little bit of time to debate that.
Absolutely. And we have a late super chat at first for Demetrius Stenson. Welcome for the first super chat. We appreciate it. And the question is, in the other direction, what do you guys think the value of buying other teams' bad contracts will be? We paid a first to get off of Al Horford.
Well, first, I want to say they're not buying other teams back on. They're just not in a position where they can say, we're going to use, $25+ million of our cap on, I don't know, Lonzo Ball to get off that money. And by the way, I wish that he was healthy. That'd be an interesting guy to try to put next to the pieces they have in place. And he was on a decent deal, but that was just a guy I thought of that is basically dead money at this point. They're not going to do it. I don't know what the cost would be.
It was a great move he brought up OKC. Great move. Get assets. You weren't going to use that cap space anyway. Sixers did it a while back with Hinkie, obviously, but you're in a spot where this is your last chance to strike on talent. There is, like, if you strike out on options A, B, C, D, E, F, G, do you maybe go, all right, well, give me a couple draft picks that I can flip at the deadline? I suppose there's a possibility, but you would have to really strike out on your options this summer because this is too unique of a chance and really your last real chance.
Also, I want to, before we leave the Paul George and the different options point, I know we'll discuss some role player scenarios this summer, I'm sure. Paul George is what, 50 if they sign him, Derek? Is the 49, 50? 49 million for Paul George. So let's 49 million allocated to Paul George. We'll wipe that away. If the Sixers were to try to go the role player route, I want people to understand there are currently in the NBA 80 different players making at least $20 million a year. That's almost a fifth of the league is making almost $20 million a year. So when you're talking about like good role players, legit role players, I could go through this list, right? There are some guys like your cousin, for example, who at 22-7, that's a great number for a team. There are also guys like Dylan Brooks and Malcolm Brogdon, and Bojan Bogdanovic is actually right under. He's at like 19.5. But then there's like Nick Vucevic making $20 million a season. Clint Capella making $23 million a season. Buddy Hield was making 23.5. Cam Johnson, 23.6. Brooke Lopez, 24 million. And so when you start to make the argument like, okay, they should load up on role players, that's a good idea in theory. Yeah. You could very quickly tie your cap up with like two guys, and then you're still in the same spot where you're you're looking at vet minimums and guys like that.
Well, even I've seen some people say, like, compare Paul George to Michael Porter Jr. as like a pejorative, like he's only barely more than Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. is going to make $36 million next year. Now, look, and you're paying a little bit of that for age and youth and upside. But, like, to your point, a starter, just a starter, not anyone who's any kind of special, just a starter, they're going to be making $20 million this year. That's the reality of the new collective bargaining agreement. You might be able to, rather than going for Paul George, you might be able to get two role players instead of Paul George, but you're not filling out an entire roster with that.
No.
Look, the one pushback I would have on that is, like I said, I think the trade market is going to be stronger than it has been in years. So maybe you can trade, acquire people in trades back into your cap space. Maybe you could stretch that to 3 capable role players. But if teams were all that confident in them filling a role at a championship level, they're probably not looking to get off that contract anyway. Correct. So it would be difficult.
Mr. Rudy Poo on the super chat says, no way y'all believe way off P would be a good option, especially on the max. We need better role players.
I mean, look, Mr. Pooh, I would prefer if he wasn't on a max too.
Mr. Pooh is fantastic.
Yeah, listen, if I could convince...
If you could get him for $30 million,
if Daryl Morey had mind-melding powers and could go to Paul George and be like, hey, will you take $30 million a year and get Paul George to say yes? Great, but that's the message I've been trying to drive home on this show over and over again to start the offseason is the reason you have options is because they're imperfect. There are not many like prime LeBron James type options that make it to free agency. Either they sign the extension or there are issues, right? Like if a guy has no issues, if he's prime years, you want to pay him all the money, they're not making it to free agency very often. That's just the way it works. And anymore, now they're forcing their way to different teams before they hit free agency in the first place. So even if they don't want to be there and the teams are, scrambling to figure something out, they're going to end up in Miami or LA anyway. So
all right. Thank you, Mr. Pooh.
I mean, it's his name. I didn't, I'm not calling him a name. It's what he wants to be called.
I know. Final one, Baba G-Day. Checking in. What's up, Baba G-Day? Haven't heard from you in a bit. Kel needs to demand a trade to the Sixers. Sixers should even be willing to take back Ben Simmons if the Nets want to dump him.
That's what I brought up months ago. I brought that up in December or in February.
Hell no. That's what I say to that idea. I
got 1 year left on his deal?
1 year left.
Yeah, Simmons.
The early feedback, it seems like out of Brooklyn, is that they're just going to ride it out with him. Or at least that's what has been reported publicly with Ben. I mean, not I can't even say friend of the show, family of the show.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah.
I saw a few in there saying, telling me, guys, I don't know. What do you want me to say? Even if I did know,
I
have a job.
If you want to waste the majority of your prime on a team that's going nowhere, that's his choice.
He's got 1 year left on his deal, so he can do.
It's 1 year of his prime. You could be playing for a contender. That's all.
And also, I mean, look, I've said this in the past in another spot, my old spot. I love my cousin. I'm not telling you a thing if he tells me something. So forget that. You can forget that.
That's the right approach.
So
can you create like a burner account in the chat and just drop it in there, and we'll try to guess?
Maybe, but people might see me typing, and
Devon Givens in the chat.
All right, we got a lot of stuff that we had left over. We can save that for tomorrow. Some few around the league, little crumbles there. We can go with crumbles there. Little crumbles there. Since Crumbles on his way to Detroit,
not unless they sponsor us. No,
all right, fair.
No crumbs.
All right, little crumbs then that we can share tomorrow.
Go one last one from last super chat.
Oh, another one. I thought that was the same one. Has Embiid ever flexed
his power
to get others? Well, I mean, PJ Tucker, he wanted
the one
here.
That comes to mind.
Yeah. So
he tried to with was it Brad that he wanted?
He was
Bradley
interested in Bradley Beal because they're both Drew Hanlon guys.
I want to say he tried to. I don't, but he didn't necessarily put pressure.
I think it was a conversation.
Yes. And Morey traded for Harden at that time.
And by the way, it ended up being the right.
Daryl was like, "Thank you, but no, thank you." And good job by Daryl.
Keith B says, "I'll be Eric Jr.
There you go.
Well, actually, his brother's name is Eric, so we're not doing that one either.
Can't be Eric Bridges.
That's his older brother, so we're not doing that one either. All right, we got a lot of people to thank.
We're saving Pat Bev for tomorrow. Nah, we'll save it for tomorrow.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, because we have thoughts.
Boy, do I have some thoughts.
Yeah.
All right, thank you everybody for being here as always. I got to shout out. First again, public enemy number 1, Money Mar. Also, thank yous to Bootzilla.
What up, Mar?
Martian Lynch, Chris B, our girl Winona,
Nona,
Luke, Keith B, Dave, Jay the Jungle, Barbara Carroll,
Barb, what's happening?
Keith B, Coach Lowell Ricketts.
What up, Coach?
Trust the PSS. That one always trips me up for some reason. Alex McCoy, Hypothetical Man, Lost Sleep TV.
Oh, man, turn the TV off, Lost Sleep.
Jay, Brian Knight, Brent. One of my best friends is named Brent, but this looks like another Brent.
What up, Brent?
Shout out to Brent. Not many of you out there. Mr. Pooh, as Derek called you. Thank you, Mr. Rudy Pooh, for checking in. We got Demetrius. Thank you for checking in, Demetrius. Phil W., the number 1 Kelly Oubre super fan in the house once again. SB Cole, you better love somebody. Neil. Who else we got? We had Real Time with Prince Blue. Who are other super chatters, Bree? Am I forgetting anybody?
Baba G-Day.
Baba G-Day is right. Thank you, Baba G-Day. Did I say Bootzilla? Three time is in here today.
AC Philla. Shout him out. Always holding down the good
for
fight.
Sure.
2-minute warning.
He is fighting for his life. Or
what up, Al?
Or it might be like the Rorschach and Watchmen. Are you locked in here with me, or am I locked in here with you? Type of situation. RG, Ash Monroe, our guy.
What up,
Al.
Ash? What up, Al?
The 2-minute warning. That's probably about good for today, everybody.
Saw Jay in there. Everybody, we appreciate it. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. If you have not already, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon,
left the bell in there, so
you get notifications each and every time we go live. No bell.
Oh, man.
Devon's turning sound on.
Sound on for the bell.
Oh, my God.
Man.
Embarrassing. Turn it off. Jeez. I'll leave it on. Oh, my God.
The funny thing is, I bet you none of it came through the mics anyway.
Right.
This guy over here. Anyway.
It did not.
If you hit the thumbs up button, maybe Devon will learn how to work the volume on his laptop next time.
I was trying to find the bell sound effect since I left the
We
bell
will
the
be
other
back
day. Ding!
for a Friday afternoon show tomorrow. We'll see you all then. Thanks for hanging out today, everybody.
Thanks, Bree.
We all silly like the mayor.